India is one of the world's largest producers of salt, and a third of it comes from deep in this desert. The dry, cracked land of Little Rann of Kutch was once a seabed. Today, over 6,000 families live in this desert, farming salt by hand. They're known as the Agariyas, and they've been salt producers in this harsh environment for generations.
તાપમાન જેલવી એકતું હોય ને ઈ જ માણા રહી શકે. એક કરતો તડકાનો તાપ અને એક નીચે જોઈ તો મીઠાનો તાપ.
The air can reach up to 118 degrees Fahrenheit. And the land they work on is so salty.
ચામડીના રોગ થાય, પગમાં ચાંદા પડી જાય, ચલાય નહીં.
All to earn just $4 a ton. That same salt will sell for $260 a ton as table salt, soap, or detergent.
मेहनत इतना करता है अगरिया, इसको इतना पैसा नहीं मिलता जितना कि वो इंडस्ट्रीज वाला है, वो पैसा इन्वेस्ट करके मुनाफा कमा रहा है.
લાગે છે ઘણું ફકીને કેવું.
The Agariyas have faced a long history of mistreatment.
But that stigma continues, and this is why, the salt farmers still continue to do this job.
કિરણમાં કામ ન કરી તો અમે ખાવીશું ઘરે રહેવી તો.
There have been government efforts to change things in recent years, but many still live in poverty. We went to India to learn how the Agariyas became trapped in the big business of salt. Thousands of years ago, this area was part of the Arabian Sea.
अपना जो सौराष्ट्र और कच्छ दो आइलैंड थे, लेकिन जो चेंजेस आया काफ़ी साल पहले, उसमें सौराष्ट्र का प्लेट ऐसे डाउन हुआ और कच्छ का ऐसे डाउन हुआ, तो बीच वाला पार्ट एक हो गया और वो डेजर्ट बन गया.
It was still waterlogged though, as part of the Indus River Delta, but an earthquake in 1819 changed the direction of the river.
And therefore this entire area got dried up.
But the water that still sits underneath the mud is 10 times more saline than seawater, making it a perfect place to farm salt.
It was considered as a commodity which is equivalent to gold.
And the Agariyas have been working here ever since. Monsoons fill this area with water starting in June. It can take another 4 months for the waters to recede.
That is when the salt farmers come into the picture.
Bhavna Harchandani is a research scholar who lived with the salt farmers for 7 months. The Agariyas arrive every year in October.
પહેલા મહિનામાં તો અમારે ગારા કામ જ કરવાનું એટલે રણ ભર્યું હોય એટલે અમારે પહેલા ચાલીને જવું પડે એક મહિનો.
Patadia Gugabhai and his wife carry everything they'll need to live in the desert for the next 6 months, including supplies to make their huts, clothes, farming tools, and all their food and water.
અને અત્યારે હું રણમાં રહું છું કારણ કે આવા જવામાં તો મોંઘવારી પ્રમાણે જોવા જઈએ તો ઘણું ઓલું થઈ ગયું, મોંઘવારી વધી ગઈ છે એટલે રણમાં રહીએ છીએ.
First, they have to find the key to this whole operation, salty brine water underground. They dig 30 feet into the mud to get to it. Digging wells can take up to a week. The families then set up these government-subsidized solar panels. They'll power the pumps that bring brine water to the surface. Then, the Agariyas build the salt pans, these expansive salt flats.
જ્યારે અમે રણમાં શરૂઆતમાં આવી કામ કરવા, ત્યારે આ માટીનું પાટા બનાવી અને ત્યારબાદ આ રોલ ફેરવવો પડે.
The roller helps them flatten out the earth.
અંદર કરી જાય, રોલ ફેરવી એટલે જમીન મજબૂત બની જાય, એટલે મીઠું સારું બને.
They'll make 10 to 20 pans, all by hand. It's back-breaking work.
Now, working in the desert is not a joke.
Everyone in the family pitches in to help.
પાટા ચાલતા એટલે અમે 3 જણા.
Then the farmers will release the salty brine water from the wells. It flows between the pans. By the last pan, the water reaches the 24% salinity needed to form big salt crystals. The farmers are so skilled that they know it's the perfect salinity simply by tasting the water.
तो ये जो स्क्वायर है उसमें मिनिमम 300 से लेके 400 तक सॉल्ट निकलेगा.
Over the next few months, as the water evaporates, salt crystals form.
દંતારા ખેંચવાના, લોખંડના આવે દંતારા હોય એ ફેરવવાના.
This rake costs $22, too expensive for many of the farmers.
દર વર્ષે લેવા જઈએ તો મેર ન પડે, એટલે હાથે નાથે રિપેરિંગ કરીને 2-3 વર્ષ ચલાવીએ અમે.
They have to rake the salt crystals every day for the first 3 months.
એટલે કા ફેરવવાનું કારણ હજી તો ફેરવી તો એ મોટું થાય ને કે ઉપલું ને ઉપલું.
They start raking early each morning to avoid the hottest part of the day.
કે જો પહેલા તો મીઠું ઓછું હોય એટલે તો એક જણો ખેંચે એટલે હાલે, એટલે અને બીજા પછી વધી જાય ને મીઠું, પછી એકથી દંતારો હાલે નહીં, પછી 2 જણાને જ ખેંચવો પડે.
But working here can be really dangerous. The life expectancy of a farmer is about 60 years, because not only do they face extreme temperatures,
They are dealing with subsoil brine, which is highly acidic, and you also an exposure to that subsoil brine also comes with a lot of problems in skin.
અમને તો આ પહેલા તો ચામડીના રોગ થાય છે, એટલે 1 મહિના લગી તો રૂજ જ ન આવે. અને ચામડીનો રોગ બી પહેલો જ, કારણ કે પહેલા પેનિયાથી જ શરૂ થાય.
many of the agariyas become blind from years of the bright sun reflecting off the white landscape. And because they're so far from the nearest village, accessing medical care is often too expensive.
અમારા નાના જો આવડે તો મીઠું સોટી ગયું ને તે ઈ ભાંગતા હતા, અને એમને પગે જણકી ફોડકી દઈ ને પછી મીઠામાં તો રૂજ આવે જ નહીં રણમાં, એટલે પછી એ વધતું ગયું. જો દવાખાને લઈ ગયા તે તોય ન મટ્યું. 1 વર્ષ 2 વર્ષ થી 2 વર્ષ લગી એમને એ ફોડકી મોટી મોટી થી આખો પગ હડી ગયો. પગ પછી કાપ્યો પછી 3 દિવસ જીવા, 3 દિવસ પછી ડેથ હો ગયું.
Despite these conditions, the agariyas live and work out here until spring, when the salt is finally ready. They harvest 3 times. The first produces the best quality salt. They leave in April, usually with over 1,000 tons of salt, and they'll sell it to a trader like Rafiq Rahimbai.
नमक रण में से लेता हूँ, खरीदता हूँ. खुद का कोई प्रोडक्शन नहीं है, अगरिया से मैं खरीदता हूँ.
His team picks up the harvest with trucks. Once it arrives from the Ran,
उसको हमारा ऑफर में डालते हैं. उसके आगे हम उसको क्रशिंग करके दोनों स्क्रू में वॉशिंग करते हैं. वॉशिंग करके हमारा सेंटीफिश के अंदर नमक जाता है, और सेंटीफिश वो पानी अलग कर देता है और नमक को अलग कर देता है.
Rafiq employs 200 workers at his factory in Tikar, processing and packaging salt. He says he loses about 20% of the salt during the washing and draining process.
फिर उसको हम उसमें अंदर आयोडीन डाल देते हैं. आयोडीन डाल के उसको क्रशिंग करते हैं.
It gets packaged and sold as edible powder salt and as crystal salt to be made into soap, detergent, and baking soda. This whole process refines the salt and makes it more valuable. So Rafiq can sell his product for upwards of 60 times what the farmers make. Bhavna says in the time she lived there, she saw salt traders working together to pay as little as possible.
If I am a farmer, if I go and argue that this price is too low, I need more, he will say, okay, don't give me your produce, go to someone else. And then that man, the trader, will go and tell the other trader, if this man comes to you, don't take his produce.
Rafiq denied taking part in such practices and says farmers can negotiate their prices.
अगरिया लोग हैं, वो जिसको समझो जिसको देना होगा वो देगा. ऐसा कोई बंदी का नहीं कि मेरे को देना पड़ेगा, दूसरों को भी देना पड़ेगा.
Rafiq says he pays the farmers above average, between $5 and $8 a ton, but Insider could not confirm that. And most farmers we spoke to said that this season's market price for salt is between $2 and $4 per ton.
જો મીઠું વેચવા જઈએ ત્યારે જાણે વ્યાપારી સંગઠન કરી અને એ ભાવ નક્કી કરે એ ભાવ અમને આપે.
That means in a good year, a family will earn just over $4,000 for 6 months of grueling work. But this doesn't pay for all the expenses they have as they prepare for the next harvest. So at the start of each season, many agariyas have to come back to traders like Rafiq and ask for a loan to help them get through it.
However, that taking advance has now made them fall into the vicious trap of loans and debts. This is the reason why they are unable to come out.
That means in a good year, a family will earn about $2,000 for months of grueling work. That's well below the poverty line. The Agarias have never really had control over the salt they farm. The British classified the group under the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, basically branding all members as criminals from birth. But many historians say it was really a way to control tribes that were poor, low caste, or didn't support colonial rule. The law gave police the power to monitor the Agarias' movements and arrest them with little cause. The British also owned this land, so even though the farmers were still allowed to work here, the British would take the salt to England, process it, and sell it back to Indians with a heavy tax.
The salt farmers, they were not supposed to take their salt out from the region. So what the women used to do, they used to hide the salt crystals in their petticoat, and then they would take it out because salt was expensive.
Many Indians couldn't afford the taxed salt, even though it was a staple in their diet.
If you cut off the salt supply, it's like, you are raging a war.
It got so bad that in 1930, Mahatma Gandhi organized one of his most successful acts of civil disobedience, a 240-mile salt march.
As he moved from town to town, it seemed that all of India was behind him.
60,000 protesters were jailed, including Gandhi himself. Salt would be contested until India's independence in 1947. After British rule, the Agarias were denotified, meaning they were no longer classified as a criminal tribe.
But that stigma continues.
With few other options, they were trapped, producing salt.
This is why, the salt farmers still continue to do this job.
અને પછી અમારે મજબૂર થઈને રણમાં તો આવવું જ પડે.
And they're still working on land they don't own. After the British left, the Little Ran of Kutch was taken over by the government, which leased it to the Agarias.
However, the government has stopped renewing their lease.
And in 1972, most of the area became a protected wildlife sanctuary.
Therefore, they are illegally producing salt. They are considered as illegal.
But the government has an unspoken agreement with the community, allowing them to keep farming around the protected areas. The government even provides equipment, like the subsidized solar panels, and boots to help protect against foot infections.
અત્યારે સોલર પંપ આવ્યા ને પછી અમને ફાયદો થાય છે.
In the long term, the salt farmers and their advocates hope for more government involvement, starting with setting a minimum price for salt.
અને આ કપા ને જીરું એવી રીતે નાખે એવી રીતે એડમાં લાવવું જોઈએ.
Ecologist Ajay fears that might backfire.
सॉल्ट फार्म बढ़ने के कारण इकोलॉजी पे ये असर हो रहा है कि पूरा जो ग्राउंड वाटर है वो भी धीरे धीरे कम होता जा रहा है. अगर ऐसे ही रहा और ऐसे ही इंस्ट्रूमेंट से लोग सॉल्ट बनाते हैं और अगर सॉल्ट फार्म ज़्यादा बढ़ रहे हैं तो ये भी हो सकता है कि आज से 20 साल के बाद शायद ग्राउंड में पानी ही नहीं रहेगा तो यहाँ पे शायद सॉल्ट भी नहीं बनेगा.
As their own farming depletes the brine, the Agarias are moving deeper into the desert, further away from established towns and villages.
Probably we can at least provide them with minimum water facilities so that, at least they have some amenities.
But until help arrives, these people will be back next season.